I live on a mid-sized mango farm just outside of a sleepy little town where the biggest drama used to be a missing goat or a broken water pump. Things were peaceful, quiet, and predictable until Karen moved into the house behind mine. She bought a newly built villa that backed directly onto my property line, separated only by a low wire fence and a line of tall mango trees. At first, I didn't think much of her. She waved a bit too enthusiastically when I was mowing the grass, shouted her greetings across the field as if we were neighbors in a sitcom, and always seemed a little too interested in my fruit trees. I chalked it up to friendliness, and being a farmer, I was too busy managing irrigation and harvest cycles to think much about it. That was my first mistake. It started subtly. I'd walk along the back of the orchard and notice small gaps in the dirt near the fence, like someone had stepped into the soft ground. A few low-hanging mangoes would be gone, even though it wasn't time to harvest. Birds, I thought. Or maybe some neighborhood kids sneaking a treat. But as the days went on, the missing fruit became more noticeable. Not just ripe ones, green, half-formed mangoes were vanishing too. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. The turning point came one early morning, just after sunrise, when I was loading fresh milk crates into the truck. I heard rustling near the trees, and when I peeked around the barn, there she was, Karen, wearing her bright pink jogging suit and holding a canvas tote bag already half filled with mangoes from my trees. She looked up, startled, but didn't apologize. Instead, she waved at me like nothing was wrong and said, "You've got so many. I figured you wouldn't miss a few." Miss a few? I stood there stunned. Before I could say anything, she turned around and ducked back under the fence, disappearing into her backyard like she did this every day. I couldn't believe the audacity. That wasn't just one or two fruits, it was nearly 10 pounds of mangoes, some of which weren't even ripe yet. I didn't know what to do. Call the police over stolen mangoes? That would make me look ridiculous. So I decided to confront her casually. The next day, I approached her fence and asked her politely not to pick from my trees. She blinked like she didn't understand what the big deal was and told me, "Oh, come on, they're hanging on my side. Technically, that's public space." That was a lie, of course. I had measured that fence myself when the property was surveyed. Everything past the metal boundary was on my land. I told her that and even offered to send her a basket of mangoes once the real harvest began, but I asked her to stay off my property until then. She smiled in that fake, tight way people do when they're pretending to agree while mentally flipping you off. I should have known she wouldn't stop. Over the next week, I started noticing more blatant signs. She was sneaking in during the early evenings when I was inside. One time, I found fresh boot prints next to the irrigation valve. Another time, a plastic bag with her grocery store's logo was left near the base of one tree. It was like she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I checked my camera setup, but the angle didn't cover the back fence well. That's when I installed a proper trail cam, hidden in the branches, pointed right at the tree line. And wouldn't you know it, the very next day, it caught her red-handed. Full HD, time-stamped footage of Karen climbing through a hole she had cut into my wire fence. She even brought her little white poodle along for the adventure, like she was on a picnic. I took the footage to her house the next morning and showed her the video on my tablet. She had the nerve to laugh and say, "That's not me," even though she was wearing the same neon green hoodie she had on in the footage. I warned her that this was now trespassing and destruction of property, and if it happened again, I'd be forced to report it. She huffed and told me I was being dramatic, that I was acting like I owned the whole countryside. I told her, point blank, that if she entered my farm again, I wouldn't be so polite next time. A few days went by, and I thought maybe the warning had worked. But then I came back from a supply run to find one of my younger mango trees, just planted last year, completely stripped. Not a single mango left, and the branches looked bent and damaged. I checked the trail cam again, and there she was, Karen. This time, she brought a ladder and was clipping mangoes off with kitchen scissors like it was her morning yoga. That was it. I'd had enough. I could have gone to the authorities, but I knew how slow and ineffective that route would be. Trespassing cases like this often get shrugged off. What I needed was a deterrent, something she couldn't ignore. So I made a call to a friend of mine who breeds and trains guard dogs. I'd helped him with a fence project last winter, and he owed me a favor. I told him I needed a dog, not just any dog, but one with an intimidating bark, sharp instincts, and zero tolerance for unwanted guests. He said he had the perfect match, a large Belgian Malinois named Shamser, recently retired from security training and full of energy. He warned me, though, Shamser wasn't aggressive without reason, but he was fiercely territorial. I smiled and told him, perfect. When Shamher arrived a few days later, he was an instant presence. Tall, sleek, with alert amber eyes and a quiet intensity. I walked him around the farm, introduced him to my daily routine, and let him sniff every inch of the mango trees. He seemed to understand immediately what was his to guard. I put up clear signs on the property. Warning, guard dog on duty, do not enter. I didn't expect Karen to actually obey them, but at least now she couldn't claim ignorance. That evening, I took Shamser on a patrol and let him settle into his new home. As night fell, I slept easier than I had in weeks, knowing the trees weren't alone anymore. The next morning, the orchard felt different. There was a new sense of alertness, not just in me, but in the way the birds scattered a little quicker and the wind felt sharper through the trees. Shamser had settled in faster than expected. He wasn't loud or restless. He just watched, observed, and listened. I took him with me to check the trail cams and the irrigation pipes, and he walked by my side like he'd done it 100 times. But I knew deep down that the real test was coming. Karen wasn't the type to let go. Sure enough, it didn't take long. 2 nights later, around 9:30 p.m., I was inside finishing dinner when Shamser suddenly bolted to the back door, ears pinned forward, growling low and sharp. I grabbed a flashlight and followed him out, heart pounding. As I rounded the corner past the barn, the light caught something, movement by the fence. Someone was crouched down, trying to wiggle through the same hole Karen had made weeks earlier. Before I could shout, Shamser let out a bark so loud and guttural it seemed to rattle the leaves off the trees. The figure froze, then scrambled backward. The flashlight beam caught the flash of pink. Karen again, now tangled halfway through the wire like a raccoon caught in a trap. She shrieked and fell back onto her side of the fence, stumbling with her little dog barking in circles beside her. "Get that monster away from me," she screamed, clutching her tote bag, which had once again been filled with mangoes. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, arms crossed, while Shamser stayed at my heel, still tense, watching her like a statue. She eventually huffed and disappeared into her yard, but I knew this wasn't over. Karen didn't understand how to take no for an answer. What I didn't expect was what happened the next day. Around lunchtime, I got a knock at the door. It wasn't the police, it was an animal control officer. Apparently, Karen had filed a complaint saying my dangerous dog had attacked her and posed a threat to the neighborhood. I just laughed. I showed the officer the warning signs I'd put up, the footage from my camera showing Karen trespassing again, and even Shamser's certification papers. The officer was polite but firm. He couldn't do much without a proper report, but he advised me to keep documenting everything. I nodded. Trust me, I was already 3 steps ahead. Later that week, things escalated. Karen started a whisper campaign in the neighborhood. She told anyone who would listen that my farm was unsafe, that I kept a vicious attack dog, and that I was hoarding the mangoes just to spite her. Some of the newer neighbors even looked at me differently when I drove into town. I didn't care much for small-town gossip, but I hated that she was trying to turn others against me. Still, I kept my focus. Mango season was nearing its peak, and the trees were heavy with fruit. I posted more signs, reinforced the weak spots in the fence, and even added another trail cam hidden near the irrigation valves, just in case. Then, just when I thought she'd gotten the message, Karen did something unthinkable. I came back from the market one afternoon to find Shamser limping. He wasn't bleeding, but something was wrong. His gait was uneven, and he kept licking his left side. I rushed him to the vet, and the x-rays showed a small pellet lodged near his ribcage. A pellet. Someone had shot at him with an air gun. I was furious. Shamser would be okay. The vet removed the pellet and gave him meds, but that was the final straw. I reviewed the footage, and although the camera didn't catch the exact moment of the shooting, I saw Karen walking by the fence an hour before I got home. She wasn't carrying mangoes this time, she had something long in her hand. I couldn't make it out, but I had a gut feeling it wasn't innocent. I took the footage to the town council and filed a formal complaint with the local authorities. This wasn't just trespassing anymore. This was animal cruelty, and it was criminal. I also called up my lawyer, who advised me to file a restraining order and press charges if I could. Meanwhile, I moved Shamser's kennel inside the barn at night and kept him close whenever I went out. Word started to spread, especially after I showed the town vet's report around. Slowly, people began to see through Karen's lies. A couple of neighbors even stopped by to apologize for believing her, bringing over crates for mangoes and offering to help reinforce my fence. Karen, on the other hand, started going quiet. Too quiet. A week later, another incident happened. This time, it wasn't Karen sneaking into my property. It was two teenagers with backpacks, clearly sent by someone, trying to scale the back fence in the early morning light. Shamser caught them before they got far. He didn't hurt them, just cornered them against the tree until I showed up. The kids confessed quickly. Karen had paid them a few ₹100 each to pick mangoes from my side and just ignore the dog. When I asked why they agreed, they just shrugged and said it sounded easy. I sent them home with a warning and a reminder that next time, the police would be involved. By now, I knew Karen was getting desperate. She had tried everything: denial, fake reports, slander, even hiring others, and still couldn't get her way. I decided it was time to end this. Not by confrontation, but with something she wouldn't expect. I called up a journalist friend of mine who ran a small YouTube channel focused on rural property rights and community disputes. I gave him all the details: photos, video evidence, vet reports, even a voice memo of one of the kids explaining how Karen hired them. He put together a short documentary-style video titled "The Mango Thief and the Guard Dog," a rural justice tale. It exploded overnight. Not millions of views, but enough to get the attention of the town's residents, the mayor's office, and a few neighboring communities. People were shocked. Some even started messaging me about their own Karen stories. The comments were full of support, people praising Shamser and telling me I had every right to defend my land. It became bigger than just mangoes. It was about standing up to entitlement. In the days following the video release, the atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted entirely. Where once there had been murmurs and side eyes, now there were nods of respect and even a few embarrassed smiles from neighbors who had initially bought into Karen's narrative. I never sought revenge or attention. I just wanted peace on my land. But the support pouring in from locals and even people online felt like validation. The best part? Karen went completely silent. Her car wasn't seen on the street for days, and her back gate, once swinging open during her stealth mango hunts, was now tightly shut. It was as if she had boarded herself up in her home, waiting for the storm she created to blow over. But it wasn't over yet. The local paper ran a follow-up story about the incident, citing the vet's report and highlighting the dangers of trespassing, especially when animals are harmed. It didn't name Karen directly, but in a small town, people didn't need names to connect the dots. Meanwhile, Shamser recovered fully. His limp disappeared after a week, and his energy returned stronger than ever. I gave him a new collar, bright red with a brass tag that read, "Protector of Mangoes." He wore it like a badge of honor, proud and alert, always staying close but relaxed now that the threats had eased. Harvest season reached its peak, and my orchard bloomed with colors so rich it made the earlier stress feel distant. I opened up my small roadside stall again, selling mangoes by the crate, and customers came not just for the fruit but to hear the story firsthand. Some even asked to meet Shamser, who, to everyone but trespassers, was gentle and kind. A local farmer even asked if I'd consider training his dog the same way. I told him it wasn't just about training, it was about trust. Shamser and I had formed a bond that went beyond command and response. We defended something real together. But while the days were getting better, Karen made one final move, her last card. One morning, I received a legal notice at the gate. Karen had filed a civil suit against me, claiming emotional distress, loss of community respect, and unfair portrayal in media. She was suing for damages, stating that my video had caused her to lose her standing in the neighborhood and suffer humiliation. I stared at the envelope in disbelief. The woman who trespassed, stole, lied, and injured my dog now wanted compensation because her lies were exposed? I forwarded the notice to my lawyer, who nearly laughed when he read through the papers. He told me it was weak, based on assumption rather than fact, and reminded me that the burden of proof would be on her. Even still, I gathered everything, every clip, every photo, every document, and we prepared a full legal response. When the hearing finally came around, it was small, just a few benches in the municipal building and a sleepy judge who looked like he'd seen every kind of ridiculous dispute. Karen showed up in formal attire, her demeanor smug and overly confident, acting like she was the real victim. Her lawyer repeated her claims about emotional damage and community defamation, while I simply provided the facts. I explained the trespassing incidents, showed the surveillance footage, provided the vet records, and presented the public apology letters I'd received from neighbors who admitted they were misled. I even had the two teenagers testify about how they were hired by her to sneak into my orchard. Their testimony sealed the deal. The judge didn't need long. He dismissed the case outright, stating there was no evidence I'd acted out of malice or lied. In fact, he commended my patience and warned Karen against further harassment. That day marked the true end of the saga. Karen packed up within 2 weeks and put her house up for sale. I don't know if it was shame, fear, or just the inability to live in a place where she'd lost control, but she was gone by the end of the month. Her house was bought by a quiet, retired couple who, on their first day, came over with a fruit basket and asked permission before stepping onto my property line to introduce themselves. I laughed, offered them fresh mangoes, and welcomed them to the neighborhood. Peace returned to my farm like a long-lost friend. The trees bore fruit, the dog guarded it, and the fields thrived without interruption. Shamser would still perk up every time a leaf rustled or a squirrel ran through the grass, but he seemed content now. There were no more intrusions, no more chaos, no more drama. The gate remained locked, not out of fear, but as a reminder that boundaries mattered. Sometimes, you have to fight a little to protect what's yours, not with fists or anger, but with calm persistence and undeniable proof. Looking back now, I realized that it wasn't just about the mangoes or the dog or the fence. It was about respect, something Karen never had for others, and something I refused to give up. I still walk past that old wire fence, now mended and reinforced, and smile every time I see a mango fall naturally to the ground. No need for fights anymore. The mangoes are safe. The farm is calm. And Shamser? He's right there by my side, always watching, always ready.